Welcome to the Lifegiver Marriage Podcast, a place for honest conversation and hope for your military or first responder marriage. This is your host, Corey Weathers, and I'm honored to share this journey with you. Close your eyes for a minute if you want to see the world. The Lifegiver app with Corey Weathers is now out and available for iOS and Android devices. You'll have access to the podcast, videos, as well as marriage curriculum that you can access and interact with right inside the app. Download the Lifegiver app with Corey Weathers today. Welcome to another episode of Lifegiver. This is Corey Weathers. I am so excited to introduce you guys to Tiffany Smiley. Now, if you are registered for the Military Spouse Wellness Summit coming up in March, you're going to get to hear even more of Tiffany's story. But Tiffany has actually been on my heart a lot lately, and I reached out to her, and I just decided to connect with her again after doing the interview for the summit, and I was just like, let's do it again. Let's get together and have her on the podcast and share a little bit of her story. So you're going to hear her story today. But you've also heard in the last episode, I started telling you about this new movement, this new idea for 2018 about telling your story, and this idea of life giver stories, that really there's a lot of power to being able to know your story, sharing your story, and the impact that that not only has on other people, but the healing that that brings to you. And it sounds like that's exactly what's on Tiffany's heart as well. So it's a perfect timing to bring Tiffany on the podcast. So Tiffany, welcome.
Thank you. It's so good to be back.
Yeah, you have an incredible story. And so I'd love for us to get into just the last 10 to 12 years and your story obviously goes way back before that. But let me just kind of update everybody and give just a little bit of a recap, and then I'm going to let you really share the story.
Sounds good.
Your husband he went to Iraq, your first deployment in the military, right? He went to Iraq, and huge just surprise. He was injured and he lost his eyesight, and that set you guys on a completely different path than you were prepared for. So take us back, actually before that, if you even want to, but you've been a caregiver for 10 to 12 years now, and that has bloomed into a whole ministry, a whole career path for you. And I'm really excited for you to share that. So take us back a little bit and share your story.
Yeah. So, starting out in life is like, I always wanted to be a nurse. And that ever since I was in kindergarten, I said, I just want to be a nurse. I just want to care for people and help people. And marrying Scotty, my husband, he was at the United States Military Academy, and being a nurse, it was like the picture of the American dream. I thought, oh, the future's bright. This is perfect. What a great profession for me to be a nurse in the military. And very quickly things changed. And like you mentioned, on April 6th of 2005, it was just a year and a half after our first wedding anniversary, he came face to face with a suicide car bomb and was blinded the rest of his life, paralyzed on the right side of his body for, a month there. They didn't even know if he would survive or make it. And when I got that phone call, I quit my nursing job. And I flew out to Walter Reed and dedicated myself to getting Scotty well again. And I, being a nurse, I had that holistic approach. So I knew it was going to take he would still need a purpose. I knew he would need all these things along his journey. What I didn't know is that it would be as difficult as it was. Mm-hmm. But every day I went in and spoke truth to him and spoke life to him and told him all the incredible things he would be able to do. And I fought for that, becoming his advocate and standing up for him on so many levels. And he was able to forgive and rebuild his life and go on to do incredible, amazing things together. We have 3 wonderful, amazing boys. We stayed on active duty. I had my boys all over the country, like many other military spouses, and moved, several times. And Scotty wrote a book, and I became his business manager and ran his business. And all of that was wonderful and great. But I lost myself. Mm-hmm. I lost who I was. And that was honestly the scariest part of my journey as a woman, as a wife, as a mother, to wake up at the end of that road and look in the mirror and wonder if God still loved me, was the bomb that went off in my life. And go ahead.
Take me take me into that a little bit, because something happens and we have that
Yes.
immediate response that we want to be the best wife possible. And so we go in there and we have every bit of energy, right? It's being pushed at, how do I speak truth?
Yes.
How do I encourage you? How do I help you realize that you can make it, right? How did
Yeah.
you go from that to wondering if God still loved you?
I know it's an incredible, it's something I have thought and prayed about a lot, because it was, um, for me, it was easy, to believe that God had a plan for Scotty. Um, that came natural. I trusted God for so much for him. I believed in so much for him. But when it came to me, for some reason, I didn't know if God still loved me. I didn't know if he had a plan for me. I
Hmm.
didn't know who to reach out to. I was so isolated, and everyone, was so focused on Scotty, and everyone's thinking, oh, yay, Scotty's better. They must be better. But, grief is an interesting thing. And I think sort of maybe in our culture a little bit, it's overlooked, or it's not given the respect that it's due. And I needed to go through grief. I had never gone through it. And I think that was part of my journey, is God knew I needed to go through it to love myself again. Um, because it was like my pot was empty.
Hmm.
I had poured everything into Scotty and my family and his career. And not that there's nothing wrong with that. It's just on my journey then, you can't pour from an empty pot. And
Hmm.
I sort of had to learn that the hard way. I had to learn it through, I think everyone's journey is unique, and we can all learn from each other in our unique journeys. But, like I said, I found myself at the end of that road totally empty. And so it was a rebuilding. It was a new road for me to take. It was a new road in loving myself, and believing that God, didn't just put me here to run ragged.
Hmm.
He also had a distinct purpose for me. And in order for me to fulfill that, I had to believe in things for myself,
Let
and I
me
had to love myself again.
let me ask this, because I'm trying to put myself in your shoes and think about, what that must have been like, and
Yeah.
imagine the emotions and everything. And do you feel like, and your interview for the Military Spouse Wellness Summit, you really go deep into a very
Yeah.
vulnerable spot and share with
Yes.
us the signs of burnout that were coming up for you,
Yes.
the experience of how you felt like you were really starting at a 10-year mark, really, of being a
Yeah.
caregiver, where you really started to fall apart and hit a
Yes.
bottom for you. And I would highly encourage everybody to register for the summit so you can hear really that story, because
Yeah.
it's so important, right, for us to know those
Yes.
moments of those red flags of
Yes.
self-care and burnout.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
when I put myself in your shoes, do you feel like you lost yourself because you were so focused on seeing his story that you didn't see yourself inserted into that story?
Yeah, it was an all out mission to get him well again. And I was willing to do, whatever it took. I knew I definitely had a piece in it.
Hmm.
Um, I had a part of it, of his journey, but it was just he reached this point where he was well again.
Hmm.
And
Where he didn't need you quite as much?
he didn't need me like he needed me, prior. And yeah,
Hmm.
there's still, and then there is the pressures of everything else I was still doing. There was a lot more on my plate given our circumstances, and there still is today. But I didn't think there was a way of working around them.
Hmm.
I didn't see that. I didn't, so once he didn't need me in a certain way, then I'm kind of sitting there like, who am I? And how did I get to this point? Because you're doing well. I still have all these other responsibilities on my shoulders, and I'm sitting here looking in the mirror, like I said, not knowing who I am or what my next step is.
Hmm.
What's my purpose?
And you mentioned grief was a huge part of this, and you said
Yes.
that the culture doesn't really pay as much attention to grief. And
Yeah.
so, do you feel like the culture more so focuses on grief if there is an actual loss of life than we grieve? Was it because that Scotty survived and you didn't realize that there was something else to grieve?
Yes, absolutely. So he survived, he got well again, and he was able to fulfill sort of his purposes in life. He was able to forgive and rebuild and go through the grief process. for a couple years, and sort of, renew his strength and that sort of thing. Um, and I never did, which is interesting because yes, I still had to grieve the fact that I lost something.
Mm-hmm.
I lost a future I thought I was going to have. And on a certain level, we all have lost something. We all are sort of living a life that maybe we didn't think we would have or we didn't expect. But I had to grieve the fact that my husband lost his eyes, that he will never run, across the park with his kids. He will never push the stroller. He'll never drive our car. Like those, and it sounds silly, maybe to a certain extent, but I had to grieve that loss. That now there was more on my shoulders, and for me to move forward, I had to go through that grief. And I think what was most challenging for me is that it was misunderstood.
Mm.
Like people thought, well, what is she grieving? Like you said, there's not a death. He's still here. Aren't you happy? But it's interesting, we can feel so many emotions at one time. Like, yes, I'm glad he's still alive. Yes, I still have him. Yes, he's a great dad to his kids, but I'm still hurting because this, and this, because he can't see his kids, and because I drive everywhere and I have all this responsibility.
Well,
So
life
to be
is
able,
different. Like his life is
completely different.
Yours is different.
Yes.
Your expectations of the next task, right? Every next task was different.
Yes. So to be able to admit that and grieve it, that I lost that, was the first step to rebuilding myself. But like I said, the hardest part was just feeling isolated, and that's, you kind of test the waters a little bit. And I would say certain comments to people to kind of see their reaction. People really had no understanding of what my journey might have been like, which forced me to become even more isolated. But, I think God never leaves us in those places. And he, slowly kept whispering to me, to keep reaching out and to keep seeking, and you'll find it. And for me, it was going through that grief process, even though maybe I felt alone, Scotty eventually came to see it and acknowledge it and understand what it was. And, in sharing too my story, it's been incredible, the reaction that I've gotten from other women as well, when I've said, like, I didn't grieve until 10 years later, and women will pull me aside and say, I've never heard that before, and now I understand what I've been going through. And that's why I say it's sometimes misunderstood a little bit in our culture, that maybe it's just this thing that you get over within a couple years, or once that person's better, they're better and you're better. But that's not how it works.
I've just heard so many other military spouses who don't realize that there are things that you have to grieve. There's different levels of grief.
Right? There is. Yes.
And I know exactly what you're talking about, because there's so many military spouses whose service members come home different.
Yes.
Right? Some of them don't have, they haven't lost their eyesight, or they may not have a visible wound or a lasting, change in a physical sense. But I hear spouses all the time say that same thing, that I didn't realize I needed to grieve things, but I'm resentful and I'm frustrated and I'm unsettled and discontent, and I don't know what to do with myself because I don't know, this change is not, it's not changing. Like, it's not going away. Right? It's forever different.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely.
Okay. So walk me through then, you got to this place where you wondered if God had a purpose for you.
Yes.
What happened at that point?
Yeah, I just absolutely had convinced myself that I was dying, sort of that this was the end of my road. I had some terminal illness, and maybe being a nurse played into this a little bit, because we take every little thing we feel or see, and diagnose ourselves. But I literally was dying. And I say that because it was like a rebirth for me. And looking back now, I can see the writing on the wall. But in the moment, I seriously was spent emotionally, physically. And I think what the beauty of how God created us is that we will feel things in our body. that he wants us to go through. So I couldn't recognize that I needed grief, but it's what my body was telling me, that I needed to grieve. So it's interesting. I just hit this point where literally I thought I was dying. And I wasn't, I was fine. But it was a rebirth for me. So it was a moment where I started to work on my own personal development. I started working on my relationship with the Lord. I started loving myself again. I started taking self-care, um, finding parameters that fit into taking care of myself, and started to value the importance of that. So I took like this radical change to what I was doing prior. And I think if I could tell people, one thing is I don't let the influence of others on the outside or what they say affect what your faith journey is and the road that God's leading you on. And I think that was probably the hardest part, like I mentioned earlier, is just being misunderstood, or people saying like, well, why are you doing that, or why? But your journey, your relationship with the Lord, and that's your relationship with your husband, your kids, that's the path you're on. So I just took this radical turn, and I went back to work as a nurse after being out of the field for 15 years, which was a huge step for me. I mean, it was unbelievable. And I was able to, I was working at an OBGYN clinic with women, ironically, and it just exposed me to so many stories, and so much hurt, and so much room for growth and for encouragement and empowerment within each other. And that's what ultimately sort of led me to launching my website and starting to write and to share my journey on a different level. I'm not working as a nurse, but I still feel like everything I'm doing goes back to my desire to be a nurse when I was in kindergarten.
It's an incredible place for us to talk about what you're doing now and how you're redeeming all of these things that happened in the past, right? Because in those
Yes.
moments where you feel like you're dying,
Yes.
it feels like literally everything is over. Everything, like there is nothing after that chapter.
Right.
And I've been thinking a lot lately about how we have these beautiful backstories, right? Like you said, I've always wanted to be this nurse, or something in me that wanted to bring life out of people, that wanted to care for people, that wanted to do something big and have an impact, right?
Yes.
And that's always been in you, and God has known that since the beginning of time.
Yes.
And then to bring you to this place, this chapter, several chapters of your life, right, where there's heartache and the trauma that you guys went through. And I can only imagine the dark moments that both of you individually and together went through, trying to figure out your view of where God is in all of that, and what does God want you to do with all of that, and on a daily basis trying to figure that out. And that moment when you feel like you're dying and you feel like there can't be anything past this.
Right.
Right. And I feel like that's where some people are. Like somebody is listening to this podcast right now and they feel like, I don't have a purpose. I don't know how I'm going to get through this circumstance, or this is too hard. Like surely God wouldn't allow me to go through something this hard if he loved me.
Right. Yes. I remember feeling that. I remember thinking, why can't you take this away from me? Like, you've seen how much I've already suffered in what I went through. So why are you allowing me to feel this way? Like, why are you leaving me in this spot where I feel like I'm dying? Like, if you loved me, you would take this away from me. But what I've learned is it's a journey. And it's a process. And it's, for me, in those times when I thought it was the end and I wanted to quit, those were the exact moments when making that choice to step out in faith was the exact, like, it was the perfect moment where God just met me there and pulled me out, So there's so many times I wanted to quit. I'm not going to lie. Like but those were the moments that God showed up. So being willing to, I finally came to that point where I'm like, I just have to be willing to be used, and to move forward. That God doesn't intend to leave us in those places. He didn't create us to stay in those places. And, very quickly I started to realize too, that the enemy will try to tell you that that's where you should be and that's where you should stay. And that's not truth. So I've had to work a lot on my mental game too, in speaking truth and life to myself, which is a huge part of my journey as well.
So you are now branching out and bringing purpose out of all this pain by encouraging other women to share their stories
Yeah.
and to walk into this journey, to apply those truths to their mind and the power of the mind.
Yes.
So I've
Yes.
been sharing this idea lately. I mean, like literally in the last week or two has been the launch of Life Giver Stories. But really, it's this idea of true healing comes when we can bring purpose out of our pain and share
Yes.
that with somebody else. And then
Yes.
somebody else gets encouraged because they're in
Yes.
that chapter, right?
Yeah.
And it's my favorite part of working with people and being a part of their story is getting to see this beautiful moment where they finally stop hiding, right?
Yeah.
And it's an appropriate time.
Yes.
It's the right time to start
Exactly.
sharing that story.
Yep. Yeah.
So, tell us about what you're doing. First
Yeah.
of all, I want to hear what you're doing, and then I want us to talk a little bit more about what is this speaking truth in your mind and this part of your
Yes.
journey that you've really been telling other people about. So, tell us about the story by faith.
Yes. So, as you've heard, my journey, has been many twists and turns and different ways of just trying to, figure out, God, what do you want from me, and who am I again? And that's sort of what inspired me to start Story by Faith. And right now, it's just a 1-day conference that I'm hosting on February 17th in Tri-Cities, Washington. And it's to bring together women from, all walks of life, to come together and learn how to use our God-given stories, our talents, that He gives each of us to make an impact, whether that's in our families, our communities, this world, whatever it is, to empower and inspire each other. So the first part of the session is going to focus on words, and the power of words and the power of what we tell ourselves. And there'll actually be some homework to take home, some journaling on just recording, sort of your subconscious. Like, what are you telling yourself? Like, you're driving in the car, going to kid pickup, and what's going through your head? That was incredibly life changing to me when I started to write out those thoughts that aren't even spoken sometimes. But what we're telling ourselves. So the first part of the session will focus on that. We're gonna have a wonderful lunch together. Then we're also going to go through and look at some of the women in the Bible and the importance of their stories and how we can glean from them, to today in our stories, what we can learn from them and how they relate to what we're doing today as women. And then at the end, there'll be a panel when we'll talk about our past, present, future, kind of mapping out, where we've been, where we're at, and what our future is, because your past does not have to define what your future is going to be. And so we'll talk about that and write down tangible ways to reach those goals and reach out, get accountability partners if you wish. So, and then do the panel, and then we're going to do celebrations and networking, and it's going to be a wonderful day. And I can't wait. It's like my heart is exploding with just everything that, if you would have told me I'd be doing this 3 years ago, I would have laughed and said, there's no way I could do this.
Well, and you've done so much more than that too. I mean,
Oh,
you are partnering with the Elizabeth Dole Foundation just this week. You were at the State of the Union address,
yes,
right?
yes.
You
That
were
was
invited
incredible.
there. It was an incredible experience. So God is redeeming so many things.
Yeah.
What was it that shifted in you? Did you have a moment where something shifted in you, where you started to realize that now I'm starting to live and bring this purpose out of this struggle?
Yeah, so as I was going through my journey, I started to, kind of struggle. I always, not that I got resentful, but I was kind of like, man, Scotty always had someone mentoring him. He always had someone like giving him a hand, like, here, I'll help you, or, and I kind of started to feel like, I don't have anyone. That's not fair. Like, as women, why do I not have someone? Why is there someone not reaching out to me?
Mm-hmm.
All those things that we say. But honestly, when I started to really take a step forward was when I began to get or have a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
And she just started to speak life into me and speak truth into me and helped me just reorganize my thoughts and help me really just to open my eyes to a whole new perspective that God might have for me, and to really change my wording. A lot of stuff I was saying is like, well, I should do this or I should do that. And so just changing my language and changing the vision that God would want for me, really focusing on that. And as I began to do that, it's truly incredible. I think when we can open our hearts, um, sort of essentially to our pain, and being willing to be open. I have more women in my life now than I've ever had before. And I think that's part of my journey. That's why I am able to do what I am doing today. I'm not doing it alone. There's a tribe, there's a team. And so it's out there. I look back and think, oh, how sad. What if I would have stayed in that place where I thought, well, the mentors are only for Scotty, or the help is only for men, or it's not. And once I was able to reach out and get connected with incredible networks of women, that's when God really started to open up so many doors and amazing things started to happen.
So one of the things I keep hearing you mention is this shifting of your mind that you had to do
Yes.
over different points of your story. And it's almost like if you're reading a novel, if you're reading a story, right, there's this common theme that's happening, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And it sounds like that was one of the themes for you, is just this kind of these wake-up calls of realizing that what
Wow.
you were thinking was not sending you down the right path.
Right.
Right. And so you had to
Exactly.
adjust your thinking and adjust the
Yes.
wording in your mind. So, and
Yes.
that's a lot of what you were talking about, you're wanting to do at this conference, the Story by
Yes.
Faith conference, is to be able to help people understand the power of their words, understand the power of the mind, and what
Yes.
happens when you shift those things. So, talk to me a little bit about that journey for you.
Yes. So it was, it's interesting because I never even really realized the power, that we possess in our minds. And I guess I probably should have, given everything I spoke into Scotty, and like, then what you speak, you become, and it's like right there in front of my eyes. But to get to do it for myself was, like I mentioned earlier, it was a whole nother journey. Um, but what I did was I kept a journal, and I just wrote down thoughts that I was thinking subconsciously, like maybe just driving to the grocery store or whatever it was. And it was really eye opening to me.
In what
Um,
way?
the negative words that I was saying to myself, the lies, like, you're not enough, you're not good enough. Oh, you mess everything up. Oh, you can't do that right. You never do that right. Oh, you're just overwhelmed. You have too much on your plate. All of this just over and over and over. That was the story I was telling myself. And that's not truth. So if God's calling me to live in truth, then I came to this conviction that I have to think in truth.
Mm.
Um, so then I would write counter. So anytime I wrote a negative thing, I would write truth. So either scripture, or I would write just truth that, God loves me. I'm capable. He created me to do this. Otherwise, he wouldn't have asked me to walk this path. So I
Mm.
just write down these sorts of things, and it was truly incredible. Um, the mind shift it's just habits, right? It's habits that I had created in my own head. And so once I could create positive habits, once I could create habits of truth, um, habits of scripture, habits that just filled my mind with who God created me to be, it was a huge improvement in my daily life, and a huge improvement in my daily attitude, night and day. And I still go back and do that every now and then. I'll just pull out my thought journal and then get to work and get myself back on track. But the power of our minds it's honestly so incredible, um, that we can actually like change the dendrites,
Mm.
and how they form and how we think. And often the rut that we're in is just because that's a habit, that we've created, that's the place we have to be in. But it's truly not. We don't have to live in that rut, and we can recreate new habits and new thoughts that are life giving, um, and help us fulfill our purpose.
So I was going to ask you, and you kind of answered it a little bit, but I
Yeah.
was going to ask you, what is your life like now after changing some of those habits versus where you were? I imagine, I guess the darkest place would have been this point where you felt like you were dying, right? When there was no purpose whatsoever.
Right.
So what has changed? What's shifted? What's different? And I know you're not perfect, right? We still have rough days. Not. You're a mom of like 3 boys, so I know your life isn't perfect, right?
It's not at all.
So what would you say is different now because you started to shift your mind?
So what is different now is I see the possibility. I see my purpose. I see the potential, and I see the value in my life. I see the value of what God has called me to be, who he created me to be as a little girl, wanting to be a nurse, or that's like reinvigorated in me that I can live, basically my essential self, like who I am. And there's nothing more freeing than really, really living out your full purpose of who God created you to be. It's absolutely freeing.
So let me ask you a tough question.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm kind of putting you on the spot here. How would you then, because we get this question all the time, what is my purpose, right?
Yes.
Well, I don't know if I have a purpose. I'm taking care of everybody else but myself. Do I have a purpose, right?
Right.
So what do you say now is your purpose?
Number one, my purpose is to serve my husband, love the Lord. Number one, love the Lord. And my relationship with him has changed in a way that I'm very much so, I just sort of talk to him all the time, I guess. It's sort of a different, I'm always talking, I'm always chatting, to serve my husband, serve my children, and then live out my purpose, for the work that God would have me to do, like with my own hands. And right now that purpose is very much so to serve women, and to encourage women and to bring together women, for a greater purpose, and bring together women to continue to make an impact and change in our families and this country.
What do you hope to encourage the women, especially that are coming to the Story by Faith conference? What do you hope to encourage them in?
I hope that they will leave knowing their value and their worth and their talent, and that they will be encouraged to step out in faith. To, whether it's starting a new business, or, being more present at home, or being more interactive with their kids, whatever it is, I hope that they will leave knowing that they have the tools and the capabilities to do that.
So this is such a risky thing, right? To ask people to do, not to come to the conference. I don't think that's a huge risk. No. But I think that what you're saying is essentially when you're at your most hopeless place, it's such a huge risk, isn't it? Yeah. To say there's got to be something more in this. And when people come together and they're trying to figure out what their purpose is, I think that that's the biggest fear, is what if there isn't a purpose for me? Right? And that takes such a vulnerable risk to admit that, and to say, I'm going to look for that. And that's what I love about even the name of this conference, Story by Faith, because faith really is taking that risk. Yes. And trusting that God does have a purpose for you, even if you feel like you don't have one.
Right. Absolutely. And that's, faith is a big thing, because faith, for me, on so many occasions, faith has required me to take action. So in order to have faith, you need to act on it. And every time I have done that, there's been incredible beauty on the other side of that. And that's what I want to share with the women as well, to step out in faith, to step out in courage, that's what God calls us to do. He didn't set us free to then have us live in chains of fear. So that's a big thing for me too, is I no longer, I try not to live in fear. I can feel it and I know it's there. And often I've learned then that means I need to go do it. Mm-hmm. And so then the faith part counteracts the fear part. And I just, Story by Faith is absolutely, it's doing something that maybe you thought you would never be able to do. That's the faith part. And God rewards those who step out for that.
So you've mentioned several times about your journey and how, and you also mentioned that this lowest of lows came, I just want to remind everybody, this low point for you came 10 years after the actual trauma happened to Scotty. So talk to me for a minute about your understanding of time.
I kind of said, like, I wanted God just to take it away. Like, I wanted it changed now. And I wanted it immediately. But, what's interesting is God's like, okay, I'll change it, but you need to trust me. You need to walk here with me. And that's what's been interesting too. I call it a journey because if anything, I've learned that it doesn't just happen like this, but it's a daily choice. What are you going to choose today? It's the small steps. It's just waking up and showing up every day. And eventually those small little steps, I mean, you might take a few steps backwards, that's okay, but they'll eventually lead to like bigger leaps and bounds. And, it's that consistency of showing up every day and being willing to start something, even if you don't know the outcome of it. I remember just knowing that I wanted to write and I wanted to share. And so I started my blog really, other than no other reason than I just felt led to share it. And I had no idea what it would lead to. But when you step out, just those one little steps, each one leads to another. And I think that's the beauty of it, that it is a journey. And I don't think we would learn the lessons if it just happened like that. That our purpose is often unveiled in unlikely places.
Yeah. And as I listen to you and as I see your face is so lit up with joy. And considering you just got back from DC, I know you've got to be tired, but there is a joy about you that didn't happen overnight. And to me, when I listen to you, my heart just leaps a little bit because, the amount of struggle and the amount of work and the amount of effort that you've gone through you've sowed that seed, right? It's like you've done your part. And then I think God not only matches that, but he blesses far beyond that. And I don't think it's always fully dependent on our effort because God is a great father who wants to definitely bless you and gift you and give you rest and give you peace. And that we don't have to always earn that, right? But there are times, like you're saying, where he calls you to take that step of faith and act and do something. And he has great reward and great harvest planned for that. And so when I listen to you and I see you now, the joy that I see from you is that God has opened up this season of influence and favor for you because of your obedience of doing that hard work, because you've walked through these dark places. And now he is opening up just this amazing opportunity for you to have influence into the lives of other women, other people, to consider their own story, that there can be something past the rough chapters.
Yes, absolutely.
And there's no way you could have done that for them 10 years ago.
No way. No. Or even, 3 years ago when I just started writing, that it is a journey. Healing is a journey. Our purpose, like we've been talking about a lot on here, is a journey, and our faith is a journey. But I think often sort of our protective mechanisms try to tell us to keep it tight and don't share it, when in reality, when we do share it, it's a blessing. There's healing and there's restoration that can occur. And I think we all want that in our lives for whatever we're going through and wherever we're at.
So let me ask you one other question before we wrap up. And this, I don't know if this is a difficult question to answer. But you said in the beginning that when you first started to say something and you first started to reach out and test the waters, you didn't get the reaction that you, I guess, were expecting, and you left disappointed and feeling isolated. And today, you're encouraging people to share their story. So what's different? Right?
Something that's always stuck with me, and I tried to do this with my kids and with Scotty, but I try to be for others what I never had. So if I can provide a space where women can be heard and their stories can be told, then I know what can happen on the other side of that because of the journey that I had to go through. So that's why I encourage them to continue sharing and continue doing that, because the beauty of it on the other side is restoration and healing. So if I can provide something for women that I never had, then I have to believe that God could use it to help change others, their lives.
Isn't that a whole other lesson on what it means to listen to a
Yeah.
person's story, right?
Yeah,
That is
absolutely.
a huge lesson there. But also, when you're teaching people to tell their story, that we also have to talk about why we're sharing our story and
Yes.
what it is that we're expecting to get from sharing our story. Do you know what I'm
Mhm.
saying?
Yes. Yes,
So, what are your
absolutely.
thoughts now that you're kind of you've experienced this, you've experienced sharing your story and having it not bounce back the way that you wanted.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've also experienced sharing your story and like mountains moving, right?
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
teaching people then what are the expectations for what we're hoping to get back? What do you tell people now?
Yeah, that is a good question. And I think the best I could say is maybe that's a space where God just has to work, because maybe you shouldn't have expectations
Mm-hmm.
um, that He will heal and restore. But you can't, like, I think I was putting too much expectation on others, honestly. And, I, like you said, I wouldn't get what I wanted, or, honestly, in the situations where mountains have moved, it's honestly not been because of me.
Mm-hmm.
It's because I didn't have an expectation there.
Oh,
And it came around full circle. So I hope that is a message also that we'll journey through and learn through and, grow through to get to that place where, um, you're not relying on someone else for a certain expectation, because it often will just leave you disappointed. And I
mm-hmm.
think we've all been there before,
Mm-hmm.
in life. Um,
I
so
love that answer. I so love that answer because um, I think you're right. And I think that's what God has been teaching me as well in the last
yeah,
year or so is the accidental acceptance that we look for from other people, right? And
yes,
yes, there's a season of life that, we find ourselves people pleasing and maybe
right,
overcommitting and things like
right,
that. But there's another level of acceptance that we sometimes don't even realize that we are going out into the world, and you know that you're doing it if you come home constantly disappointed, right?
yes,
Or you feel the constant disappointment of other people and beginning to ask yourself, what is my expectation? And
right.
I couldn't have said it better than what you said. And it was such a ministry even to my own heart, you saying it that
Oh,
way, to say, the mountains moved when I didn't have the expectation of
yeah,
what would happen. That the
true.
courage it takes to share your story and saying, I only have a story because God gave me a story
Yeah,
and I'm not responsible with what he does with it.
yes, absolutely. That's it.
Okay.
That's it.
Well, I am it is such a joy to talk to you. I am so proud of you for being obedient to just taking the next step, just each day taking the next step and doing whatever God asked you to do and
Mhm.
trusting that he had a plan. Um,
Yes,
that
yes,
something tragic can happen in your life and we may never have meaning for it. It
right,
may never make sense.
right,
And
absolutely.
we may never know whether God just allowed it or whether he knew it was going to. I mean, I think there's a whole other debate on that, right? Did
Yeah,
God know it was going to happen? Did he
absolutely.
plan it? Did he inflict it? Did he, like, I mean, there's so many questions that you have to go
Yes,
through in order to
yes,
walk through that journey. But the
yeah,
point is that you can ask all of those questions and answer all those questions. And like you said, go get the counseling, go get the coaching so that you
yes,
can take those next steps. And I'm so proud of you for doing that and being obedient, because what God has opened for you, the level of influence that he's opened to encourage and minister to so many people because you were so obedient in those little moments, is such a blessing to watch. And I hope those that are listening are able to say, you know what, it may not be my turn yet. That influence and favor may not be designed for me right now. But if I can just take the next step and take the risk to figure out what that story is, that
Yes.
God will open up an opportunity for me to share that story.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love saying that, you know, God never brings us to a place to say, "Okay, you have no opportunity here."
Hmm.
You know, he never does that. In any place you are, wherever you are, there's always opportunity. Always.
Well, thank you so much, Tiffany, for sharing your story today. If you would like to hear more of Tiffany's story, especially just what walking through those little steps were like for her, make sure you register for the Military Spouse Wellness Summit. She also has this amazing conference that is right around the corner
Yes.
in February, Story by Faith, up in Washington. I am praying huge blessing on that event.
Thank you.
And on the future vision of that, in case God opens the doors for more people to be able to walk through and learn that from you. But if nothing else, I hope people are encouraged today that wherever they're at, that they have a story and they have a purpose. We just have to take that next step and take the risk to discover what that is. So Tiffany, thank you so much for what you're doing.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us today too.
Absolutely. It was super fun. Thank you.